Mr. Mwendo. I'll be taking you through history paper 2. I hope you are ready and you are set to begin. Paper 2, in paper 2 East, there are 17 topics which are examined, and there are 3 topics examined from Form 1. We already know this: Introduction to East and the Government, Introduction to East and the Government. Topic number 2, Early Man. Topic number 2, Early Man. Topic number 3, Development of Agriculture in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Development of agriculture in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Now, topic number 4 from Form 2 work: Development of transport, development of communication, trend, development of industry, urbanization, social, economic, and political organization of African societies during the 19th century. We talk about the Shona, the Asante, and the Mbunganda. In Form 3, we have European invasion of Africa and the process of colonization. European invasion of Africa and the process of colonization, colonial administration, then nationalism in Africa, starting with Ghana, Mozambique, and South Africa. Nationalism in Africa, Ghana, Mozambique, and South Africa. Form 4 work, topic number 13, World Wars, international relations, cooperation in Africa, social, economic, and political developments and challenges in Africa since independence. Social, economic, and political developments and challenges in Africa since independence, whereby we talk about Tanzania and Democratic Republic of Congo. The last topic is known as electoral process and the functions of government in other parts of the world. The electoral process and the functions of the government in other parts of the world. United States of America, Britain, India. So these are the 17 topics which are examined in paper 2. I think you already know that, and that is not very important. Now let's get back to our business. Each has 3 sections, and we have section A, whereby it has 25 marks, and the questions are examined from all the topics in the entire syllabus. So questions are set from all topics in the entire syllabus. How are they distributed? Distribution of the questions, how they are distributed. We have in section A, which is 25 marks. The first to third question come from Form 1 work. The first, second, and third questions come from Form 1 work. Then number 4 to 9 is from Form 2 work. Followed by number 10 to 11, Form 3 work. Then the rest from number 12 to 17 is Form 4 work. So we are aware of section A, question 1 to 3 is from Form 1 work. Number 4 to 9 is from Form 2 work. Number 10 to 11 is from Form 3 work. Number 12 to 17, Form 4 work. Now, what about in section B? Section B, this is how the questions are distributed. We have 4 questions. Number 18 come from Form 1 work. Then number 19 is Form 2 work. Number 20, it can either come from Form 2 or Form 3 work. So let us be aware of that. The question in number 20 can come from either Form 2 or Form 3 work. Number 21, question number 21 usually comes from Form 3 work. Form 3 work. Then, so that is the end of section B. There are 4 questions in section B. The first one, number 18, comes from Form 1 work. The second one, number 19, usually comes from Form 2 work. Then number 20, Form 2 or Form 3 work. Number 21, Form 3 work. And that marks the end of section B. The last section, which is usually section C, we have 3 questions, and where a student is supposed to answer any 2. Number 22, in many cases, it comes from Form 2 or Form 4. So 23 comes from Form 4 and 24 come from Form 4. So there are times when all these questions are tested from Form 4 work in section C. And usually, East Paper 2 being talking about the word East and government, section C is usually the word government. So we are through with that. There is something we are supposed to note as students. NB, much of paper 2 work is mainly Form 2 work and Form 4 work. Much of work in 311/2, which is East Paper 2, is basically Form 2 and Form 4 work, which accounts for over 80%, or sometimes, like it was the case in 2019 K.C.S.E., it was Form 2 work was tested at 9%, Form 4 work 54%. So if you want to pass in paper 2, you must prepare in Form 2 and Form 4 work, which is very, very important. So as students, we need to note that much of paper 2 work is mainly Form 2 and Form 4 work. And I have already shown how the questions are distributed. Now let us go to what is tested in the techniques. There are 2 types of questions in East. 2 types of questions. We have closed-ended, and open-ended questions. Open-ended questions. So we have 2 types of questions, closed-ended and open-ended questions. The open-ended questions does not give you the number of answers to give. For example, The open-ended questions do not give you the number of points to give. For example, explain the effects of the First World War, 12 marks. Explain the effects of the First World War, 12 marks. Now, that is a open-ended question. Open-ended question. So, even if it is open-ended question, it will be marked the first 6 points, which are correct. The first 6 in the order in which they appear. The first 6, any extra will be ignored, even though the question is open-ended. Why? Because there is no much time to mark. Especially students are supposed to give the best 6 answers in such a question like explain the effect of First World War. Another question which is open-ended, give methods used by Europeans to acquire colonies in Africa, 5 marks. Give methods used by Europeans to acquire colonies in Africa, 5 marks. So you are supposed to be guided by the number of marks. And as I have seen over the last many years, the marking will be the questions, the 6, only if it is of 12 marks, 6 points. If it is of 5 marks, 5 points. So if you give more than that, it will be ignored. The other one is closed-ended questions. These are questions which tell you to give a certain number of answers. And again, do not give more than required. For example, give one method of trend. Give one method of trend, 1 mark. So this is a specific question asking you only one question, 1 mark, which you are supposed to give only one, the mark that you are asked. What was the main factor for growth of Johannesburg? For example, example number 2, what was the main factor for growth of Johannesburg? So in these questions, closed-ended, a student is expected also to give the specific number of answers. And as we are going to note, nowadays, NEC is no longer asking about open-ended question. But there are times when open-ended questions cannot be avoided, especially a question on structure. If you are told to describe the structure of British colonial administration in Nigeria, that question cannot be closed-ended because it has more than 6 points. There are many points you can give, but it cannot tell you to give the first 6, but the first 6 will be asked. Another question which is closed-ended, name 2 types of constitutions. Name 2 types of constitutions. Name 2 types of constitutions. Identify 1 type of trend that is about closed-ended questions. So it is important whether a question in it is closed-ended or open-ended. Please, as a student, a question of maybe described, it cannot be closed-ended because where you are describing like the organization of Trans-Saharan Trend, there are more points to give. Even though the first ones will be considered, but you are supposed to give as many points as possible. Like for example, in this question, describe the political organization of the Asante Empire during the 19th century, 12 marks. Describe the political organization of the Asante Empire during the 19th century. That is a question which has many points. And so you are supposed to write as many points as possible when you are describing that the political organization. It can also be describe the social organization of the Mbunganda during the 19th century? This is a question which is open-ended, and because it has many points, you are supposed to give as many points as possible. However, the first 6 will be considered. The first 6 will be considered. So I hope we are together in that. I want you to note, as students, as you wait for your K.C.S.E, questions asking about main. We also have questions asking you about to give the main. Please note, you are supposed to give only one response. For example, we may have a question, what is the main advantage of air transport? Main advantage of air transport. Air transport. What was the main method of trade used during the pre-colonial Africa? Now, this question requires only 1 point, only one. If you give 2, for example, you can talk about the air transport being fastest. It is the fastest. So you get a mark. But if you give another answer on top of the first one, you are going to lose the marks. Maybe you can write it is fastest, it is quickest. This is correct, but you will not get a mark in that. Why? Because it will be seen you are guessing the points. So a question asking you, give the main reason why Europeans colonized Africa. That is a question asking the main. So only 1 point must be given. I want you to note that because many students lose marks because of knowing so much. They write more than required. You are asked the main, you give 2 points, and so you end up losing a mark. Another question which is asking about the main, for example, we have give the main reason for growth of Kilwa as an ancient city in Africa. Give the main reason for growth of Kilwa as an ancient city in Africa. Or you can be asked, give the main function of ICC. Give the main function of ICC. So if you give more than 1 point, you are going to lose a mark. So students, a question asking you about main, give only 1 point. And there's usually only 1 point which is main. However, there may be other questions which are more than 1 main point, but a student is supposed to give only one for them to score in this question. So there are other questions asking you to give 1. No problem if you give more response for this. For example, if you are told to give 1 method of trend. Give 1 method of trend. For this one, you are asked 1, and only the first one will question answer will be marked. However, you will not lose mark because you have given 2 points. For example, give 1 use of bronze in ancient Benin. Give 1 use of bronze in ancient Benin. If you give more than 1 point for that, give 1, then the first one will be marked and the second one ignored. But that is not the same as give the main. I hope students you are getting me. Give the main, you are supposed to give only 1 point. Give 1, only 1 point is required, but if a student gives more than 1, the first one will be marked. The second one will be ignored. Name 2 houses of the British Parliament. Now that is a question asking you 2. So if you give 2, it's okay, but don't give more than required. If it is 2, give 2. If it is 5, give 5. Don't give many points which will not be considered and which will make examiners maybe waste time looking at where your points are. There are the things that we are not supposed to use when answering questions in East. So we are supposed to avoid some of these. For example, we have students who like using this. These are not supposed to be used in exam, these arrows. Others are like this. We have students who are using this. Please do not use them in each exam. Avoid use of this. Others use it like this. They give the answers like this, Roman 4. Others even use this in exam as they write the points. There are those who label the answers as 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Others even use other marks like this. All these are not allowed to be used. Don't use all these in East. Don't use those marks in East. So let us not, we are supposed to avoid that. Just give the point without using any of these marks and others because they are not needed, they are not required in your exam. Just give the points as they are and don't even number them, and you are going to score. Another thing that students are supposed to note, do not write on the margins. We have cases of students writing on the margins. The margins usually you have a paper like this. So this usually is the margin and this is the margin. Don't write on it. If you are to write just inside here and you will score the marks. Do not write on the margins. There's a reason why you are not supposed to write on the margins because the exam is marked by many people. There are those who mark inside the margin, and there are others who mark at the right hand side of the margin, and others on the left to confirm whether the marks awarded are the same. So please, as a candidate, please do not write on the margin. However, even if you write where, your points will be marked, but they might be marked and you end up losing points because you are not following instructions. So let us keep on that. Again, we should not, as candidates, we should use the correct words. Don't write in exam this, people, you will not score. You are going to lose points because a point 2 marks because of that. Another student writes therefore, we are supposed to avoid this. This is not allowed. Write the complete word before. Don't use any of this. You will lose marks for no good reasons. So students, it is important to be careful. Another thing for you to note is when you cancel a point. Maybe you have written a certain question and you want to cancel. Don't just make your work very dirty by writing all over. But what are you supposed to do? Use a ruler and cross a line that will not be marked. We will see you have cancelled your answer. So please avoid this making your work dirty. Just cancel using just one line and there will be no problem. But when you make your work dirty, you may end up losing marks because you not know whether you are canceling or that is how you write, and you may end up losing some marks. So as students, it is important to follow and to be careful. Please make your work very neat. And I want you to note that questions in section A, let them follow one another the way they appear. Don't come and start doing maybe number 1, number 9, number 2, number 3. Usually the points will be given in a sequence. The answers for number 1, number 2, number 3, up to number 17. So please ensure that you write your responses in order. in order. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, up to the last point, number 17 in section A. If you do not know a question, maybe for number 1, for example, leave enough space for that question so that you will not write number 1, number 15, number 17, number 2, number 7, number 6. Now you will confuse the examiner when they are marking. However, in section B, because they are structured questions, you can start with any. So we are supposed to note as students, section A, the questions in order. Let the questions be in the order in which they appear. 1, 2, 3, up to number 17. That is the order which I advise my students to follow. Make sure you follow that. Do not just write just number 9, number 7, number 2, number 3, number 4. You will confuse the examiners, and know that the exam is being marked very fast because of basically the time which is there, but you should ensure that you score as many marks as possible because you arrange your work well. Your work is also neat. Make sure that your work is neat. You are given much space to write. Usually, there is more than 16 pages to write, and we have never seen any student using all of this. We have not seen even students writing up to 10 of them. So space your work very well. And make sure if you start with, you have started section A, for example, you leave your question 1, you can leave a line. Question 2, you can leave a line as you are after you answer. Question 3, you can leave a line, I think just a single line. This space is usually too much for you. And do not change the number of the numbering of the questions. Please be careful on that. For section B and C, section B usually have question number 18, 19, 20, 21, both with the A and B, A and B, A and B, then A and B. Here, you are supposed to answer any 3 questions. And any 3 means either you can choose number 19, number 21, and number 18. The rule of A and B. There are students who come and tick number 18A, number 19B, number 20B. Then they will say they have answered 3 questions. No, this is not 3. You can choose, if you choose number 18, you answer both A and B. If you choose number 21, for example, you answer both A and B. If you choose number 20, for example, you answer both A and B. And please, if you are told to answer any 3, don't try to answer 4 questions. Because if the questions are 4 and you are asked to answer 3, 1 will be ignored and they will be taken in the order in which you have done them. So follow the instructions and choose, you can start with any. A student can start with the number 21, but don't change it to be number 18. Number 18 on the question paper remains to be number 18. So please, students, ensure that you can do the questions in any order. The same as for section C. Section C, you are given 3 questions, 22, 23, and 24. You are supposed to take any 2. And if you skip number 22 and do number 23, do not change it. Do not change it to be number 22. Write it in your answer sheet, number 23A. Then you answer, you can leave some lines after answering part A, then go to part B. And now you make sure that your work is neat and use and good handwriting. And I usually encourage my students to use either blue or black. Don't use any other pen. Use blue or black for when you are doing your K.C.S.E. Use either blue or black in answering the questions. So please, students, note that. Make sure your work is neat Do not write on the margins as I have said. Follow the instructions. Ensure that your work can be read even by somebody who is very far. Usually what happens when your handwriting is bad, we take your script to be the last. And when it is, we take them, the ones which have good handwriting, we first mark that, then the others with bad handwriting will be marked as the last. And this is the time when people have already formed a negative attitude about you, about the candidate. This is a candidate who has bad handwriting. And if it is unreadable, you end up getting either 0-1 because of your poor handwriting. And if your handwriting is poor, do not use a sharp. Don't use a sharp pen. Don't use it. And try, write slowly, write slowly. So there are terms which are used in each, especially in section A. There are various terms which are used. And section A, we do not, in section A and section B, and section B part A, section B, section C part A, this section B, there are terms which are used, like name, like state, like list, like mention, like what. These are some of the terms used in section A and section B part A and section C part A. We also have other terms like outline. We also have other terms like highlight, which is not much used. You may find one question concerning this, but all the same, they are telling you to give the answer. You don't explain. There is no explaining. In section A, part section A, the questions number 1 to 17, and section B, part A, and section C, part A, these are some of the terms which are used. And so they require a short answer. They require a short answer. A good example, you can be asked to state 2 advantages of using animal transport. 2 advantages of using animal transport. Give 1 reason for decline of Meroe. Give 1 reason for decline of Meroe. Give 1 function of the Ondwira festival among their Sunday. So the questions do not require you to explain. Usually section A is testing short answers, and section B part A and section C part A, you are supposed to give a short answer. Don't explain. However, if you explain, you will not lose a mark, but what is required is the one which will be marked. So as students, we must ensure that we give what is required. Now, when we come to section B and C, there are some terms which are used there. We have explain, which is much used today in East. We have describe, then we have discuss. However, this is not much used because it was used a long time ago. It used to be used, but it is not much used because there was a time we, as students, would go and discuss with their friends, and they are doing exam. Go and sit. We have been taught to discuss the effects of the Second World War, and discuss 6 effects of the Second World War. Now, a student moves from where they are seated, it is in the exam room, and they go and sit with another one because they are taught to discuss. Much of what you find is explain, describe, but sometimes discuss is being used. So you are supposed to give a detailed answer for explain, describe, discuss. You give explanations, and I will talk about how you are supposed to give them. So that one we are through. I want to go to another point. I want us to write this question. Outline 5 economic activities of the Asante Empire during the 19th century. Outline 5 economic activities of the people of the Asante Empire during the 19th century. Now, for questions like this, there are students who come and write, maybe others, maybe even they don't use and, then gatherers, and you want to get a mark. Another one, farmers. These are some of the mistakes students make. We talk about others, livestock keepers. Now, another point can be maybe traders. There are students who give such answers. For this one, you will not score. For this one, you will not score. For this one, and even for that one. What is the reason? Why is it that a student will not score in that? All these answers are wrong. What is the reason? A question asking about economic activity, this is what? Hunting and gathering. And do not separate them. There are other students who write hunting and gathering as 2 different points. Give them as one, following hunting and gathering. So you score if you write that. When you write farming, you score because the economic activity is this. Don't say farmers. Farmers is not the economic activity, but farming. Livestock keeping. So if you write this, you get it wrong. Trenders, talk about trend. Even do not explain why they trended with you. Talk about trend because these are short answers. So these are challenges sometimes we find students writing. So a question on economic activities, give the economic activity. Livestock keeping, trend, farming, basket weaving, hunting and gathering, and you are going to score. There are other questions which ask you about years. There are other questions which ask you about years, and we have students who have a problem with them. Especially, we usually have a problem. A question asking you maybe a question asking you explain 6 challenges facing Democratic Republic of Congo, and you give wrong years. When you are giving years, for example, you say when Congo got independence in 1963, and you are giving your answer as that. The point may be correct, but wrong years, you will not score a mark. Give the correct years. And if you do not know the years when the country got independence, you don't use it when answering questions. Avoid it. And after all, the point may not be the years. You will be asked about maybe political challenges this country is facing. Then you say when it got independence, and you don't know the years. You can say when the country got independence, there was this political instability. You can talk about that and you get a mark. But when you give a wrong year, then the point becomes wrong. The point is very wrong. So we should not that as students, when you give wrong years, we lose the marks. Let the years be correct, and let the points of the years be correct. But there are times you can avoid the years, and the point that you are writing, you get the correction. So a question asking about years, you give the correct year. If you give the wrong year, you are going to lose the mark, even if the points are correct. We also have sometimes students using abbreviations. For example, you can be asked, name the political party which led South Africa to independence. Name the political party which led South Africa to independence. Maybe a question of section A. A student writes A, N, C. This will not be accepted. African National Congress, that is what is required. You can be asked maybe the political party which led Ghana to independence, and a student writes CPP. This will not be accepted. It will be wrong. You are supposed to give Convention People's Party. Convention People's Party. Or you might be asked, name two political parties which fought for independence in Ghana. Two political parties which fought for independence in Ghana. A student writes this, they lose a mark. Another one may write UGCC. So don't use this. Don't use this. These are not allowed. Use the full name. African National Congress, Convention People's Party, United Gold Coast Convention, so that you can score a mark for that. However, there are some which are accepted, like for USA. When you are talking about USA, that will be allowed. When you are talking about USSR, that one is universally accepted. When you are talking about UN, you can talk about UN and you score a mark. These ones are accepted. Then maybe you are asked to name the two superpowers which emerged after the Second World War. You can talk about USA, you can talk about USSR, but use the full name. United States of America, United Nations. Talk about the full name. Avoid all this so that you may not be penalized. Maybe who knows, after some time, this one will not be, we will say we will not, NEC may decide we will not mark this. We want the full name, United States of America. So it is important for students to write all don't use the short form of a word, don't use acronyms, don't use mnemonics, because you may end up losing the mark. There are other questions still concerning the same, like there were questions which were asked in some years back, like you can be asked, name the European power which colonized Zimbabwe. Which is the answer for that? Name the European power which colonized Zimbabwe. There are students who write this. When you write this, you are going to lose. The correct answer is what? This one. This is the one. Name the European power which colonized Zimbabwe. You write that. There was another question asking about the European power which colonized Democratic Republic of Congo. And so the answer was Belgium. Belgium. This was the answer which was marked. Now you can also find another question. Who colonized Tanganyika after the end of the First World War? All these are questions which were asked in the K.C.S.E. Who colonized Tanganyika after the end of the First World War? So the best answer, the correct answer is that. You give that as the answer. When you give this, you are going to lose. When you give this one, you are going to lose. So be careful when you are writing questions concerning such questions. There are other questions concerning numbers, maybe number of people. Explain, for example, explain 5 effects of the Second World War. Sometimes we have students explain 5 effects of the Second World War. Then a student writes, maybe 12 million people died. 12 million people died. You are going to lose. Why? Because you are not there to know the number of people died. But they know there are books which are giving the approximate number. But for your case, do not give the number. Just say many people died during the war, and these included soldiers and civilians civilians. So by saying that, you score 2 marks. And it is important for you to note in part section B, part B, and section C, part B, there is no 1 mark. If your explanation is not complete, you will lose the 2 marks. You will either get 0 or 2. Don't expect to get 1 mark because you have given maybe a point and you have not explained. No, it is either 2 marks or 0. You either get 2 marks or 0. So please make sure for section B, part B, and section C, part B, you explain your answer. Otherwise, you are going to lose marks. So there is no 1 mark, not like some years where a student who had not explained will be given maybe 1 mark because has given a correct answer but has not explained. Make sure you explain your answer. So don't talk about 12 million people dying. Talk about many people dying because you are not there to know the number of people who died, but many can be from 2 etc. Use the simple language in your explanation. Use simple language in your explanation. There are students who you may use in it for that question. For example, explain 5 effects of the Second World War, 10 marks. A student writes this, which this means what? We are supposed to avoid such. Use the simple words like many people died. You can talk about a lot of property was destroyed, like buildings, roads, industries, among others. Again, make sure you give the correct example. You give the correct example. For example, there was this question in 2018, a student where students were giving wrong example. This was the question. Explain 6 challenges faced by nationalists in South Africa during the struggle for independence. Explain 6 challenges faced by nationalists in South Africa during the struggle for independence. There were students who were writing when South Africa got independence, maybe in 1960, that is a wrong year. So even if the other point is correct, that will be wrong. So another one, other students were talking about assassination of some nationalists, and they are giving an example of Nelson Mandela. So you will lose a point because you have given a wrong example. Make sure you give the correct example, or if you do not know an example to give other than giving the wrong one, avoid, don't give the example. Another point, another area which has some challenges, especially spellings in East and the government. Marks are given for wrong spellings, provided they do not affect the meaning. Marks are given for wrong spellings if they do not affect the meaning. For example, if a student is taught to identify one method of trend, and then a student gives barter trend, this one, and another one gives the same as this one, both of them BATA. This one, the first one BARTER. This one will score and the other one will score. However, because this has not affected the meaning, but the other one who will give maybe this one, they will not score. Why? Because we know the meaning. It has given the meaning of something else. So for that, marks is given. It is just like the name of a person who led Ghana to independence. Maybe a student can write Kwame Nkrumah in that way. Another one writes Kwame Nkrumah. Because it is a name of a person, each one of them are going to score. Each one of them are going to score. And the question we had written about method of trend, two, a student can write currency trend. They are going to score the same as the one who writes it with single R. Both are going to score because this has not affected the meaning. So please make sure you write the correct spellings to avoid getting sometimes being losing a mark. But you will not be penalized if the meaning is not affected. If the meaning is not affected. So give the correct number of years. Don't give the wrong years. We have also talked about the questions concerning maybe effects. If a question is asking about effects and maybe open-ended questions, we have said what give as many points as possible, but not. Nowadays, many of the questions are becoming closed-ended. Now there is another question maybe asking you, give reasons why the Maji resisted. We have had a problem with this. A student writes reasons why Maji resisted. A student writes this, another one, and they want to score. Please, in secondary, you are supposed to communicate. And so, make sure you communicate. These ones, you are not communicating anything. But you can say, Africans were against taxation. So you can write the point as this. You can say, as one of the points so that you communicate, Africans were against taxation. Now you score a mark because you are communicating. But writing taxation, maybe you end up losing a mark. So be careful on the question asking about reasons why some Africans like the Maji who resisted, others who collaborated. Give a point which is complete. Don't just give a point forced labor. Say Africans were against forced labor. Africans were against forced labor because they did not want forced labor. That is why they resisted. They wanted to retain their independence. Don't just say independence. So your answers should communicate to the examiner. Make sure your answer is communicating. If you are not communicating, you may end up losing a mark. Another area which I want us we consider is identify three traditional forms of communication. Identify three traditional forms of communication. There are students, maybe we can talk about traditional forms of communication. Traditional forms of communication, maybe traditional forms of communication. There are students who just write smoke. There are students who write smoke. So don't write smoke. Smoke is not one of the answers, but it was what? Smoke signals. You write that and you score. Don't write the word ons, but you talk about on blowing. Then you score you score a mark. Don't talk about drums. You talk about drum what? Drum beats. Drum beats. It is not the drums which were communicating, but it is when they were beaten, they would communicate. So don't write this. When you write this, you are wrong. But when you write this, you score good marks. And we have already said, make sure that you give the answer which is communicating. And then you give the answers in good and writing. You give the answers in good and writing. Now, concerning the other questions which I have talked about explanation in part B, maybe section B, part B. You are taught to explain, you are taught either to discuss, you are taught either to describe. I know there are students who first state the answer, they state, and then they give explanation. There is no mistake in doing that. You can give the answer, you can state the answer and give explanation. Again, you can explain in direct without stating the answer. A good example is explain 6 economic challenges facing Democratic Republic of Congo since independence. Explain 6 economic challenges facing DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, since independence. Maybe a student would write this, maybe the first point, the student can talk about unemployment. When you talk about this point, you have already stated the point. But now explain. Maybe you can say there is a lot of unemployment in DRC. There are many youths who are unemployed, and you will score a mark. Talk about poor transport and communication. A student can state the point, poor transport and communication, and then give explanation. Even though the government has tried to develop transport and communication, however, there are many areas where there is poor transport and communication. You can talk about maybe under exploitation of natural resources. You can say the country has natural resources but have not been fully exploited. Now you are explaining. But as I say, do not over explain. So when you are explaining or describing, make sure you give details about your answer. Don't give a short form of the answer. So you give details concerning your answer. So we are noting that we should ensure that we give our details about our answers which we give. Now you can be asked a question like this. State the type of government practiced in Britain. State the form of government practiced in Britain. Maybe if you give the question, the answer is democracy, maybe you are going to lose a mark. The form of government practiced in Britain, you must talk about what? Constitutional monarchy. Then you score a mark. Now there was this question which was asked in 2018, and in many cases it usually comes in every KCSE section A. What was the immediate cause of First World War? Maybe a student who writes assassination There's a student who wrote this, assassination of Sarajevo, and they scored a point. We are not marking the tense. So this is not language. Assassination of, it was supposed to be at Sarajevo, but the student scored. Then we can talk about, of course, the answer is assassination of Frank Ferdinand. It will not matter maybe the spelling so much because it is the name of a person. So for that, you are going to score. Another question that has been asked for many years, identify one area in Africa where early agriculture began. A student gives a general answer. Identify one area in Africa where early agriculture began. A student writes Egypt. You are going to lose a mark because your answer is general. So you are supposed to talk about along Nile Valley in Egypt, along Nile Valley in Egypt, or along Nile Valley, and then you will score a mark. There are questions that can ask maybe to give maybe some stages of development of early man. You can be asked give 3 stages of development of early man before maybe Homo sapien. Any stage that is before then, you are going to score. Any stage, whether they are in order or they are not in order, but the stage must come before. The stage must come before then. So for that case, you will score if you give the stages which are before, not necessarily in the order in which they appear. So please note, as a student, make sure you read and understand the question. So usually, we have 2.5 hours, and I usually encourage students to do this. The first 15 minutes, you can read the questions, and then you can identify, read the questions. You can note some points, some short form points on the question paper. Then followed by 2 hours, now you answer the questions. You answer the questions. You now answer the questions now you have identified. Then the other 15 minutes, review your work. Read the answers you have written. Read the question, you read the answers, correct some errors that you may have made while you are answering the questions, so that you will not be penalized for no good reason. So please read the questions in the first 15 minutes you are given the exam. Don't be in a hurry to begin answering. So read from number 1 maybe to number 24 all the questions. Read again, begin at that time now selecting. You are answering the ones which you are remembering very fast. You can answer them in short form answers in the question paper because it is yours. There's no problem. Then for the next 2 hours, now you answer the questions. Then the last 15 minutes, review your work. And so anything that is not needed, make sure you cancel. You can even use the back of the question paper to prepare your answers. So, but at the end of the answering, you are supposed to cancel the question, the answers maybe which you don't need, which you use to prepare at the back of your question paper. So don't be mean in writing. Write as much as possible, but do not over explain. Do not over explain. Not that do not over explain. Because of that, even if you have given even written in two pages, 1 point will still be 1 point. Always be guided by the number of marks which are given. Being guided by the number of marks which are given. Even if you explain and a question is of 2 marks, there is no way you can get 3 marks. If it is 2, you will still get 2 marks. So other questions which I've seen, there are challenges. Maybe students are asked, there was a question maybe in 2009, which was repeated, has been repeated many times, and the students do not understand, some students do not understand this question. Explain 5 benefits of discovery of fire by early man. Student is asked, explain 5 benefits of discovery of fire by early man. Now, if this is the question, the question is asking you about uses of fire, uses of fire, or how did the discovery of fire improve the man's way of life? How did the discovery of fire improve the life of early man? How did the discovery of fire improve the life of early man? 10 marks. So you are taught to explain how did the discovery of fire change the way of life. Now you can say man was able to cook and roast food. Man could be able to warm himself during cold seasons. That is how the discovery improved the life of early man. That is how it improved the life of early man. So these questions are meaning the same. Another question, identify 2 reasons why early man lived in groups. Identify 2 reasons why early man lived in groups. You give the responses. For example, one of the answers is maybe for companionship, which is correct. We can have for security purposes, which is correct. You score a mark, and I've said do not use any of this. So please note those changes. Those things are very important. And we have said many of the questions. Ensure that each point is clear and complete. Ensure that NB, a point to note. Ensure each point is clear and complete. The point should be clear and complete. Don't give a point which is not complete, because you will lose you will lose 2 marks, especially in section B, part B, and section C, part B. Maybe ensure that each point is clear and complete. That is why I will encourage students, after space your work properly. Ensure that your work is spaced properly. For example, if you answer number 18A, you can give answers at some point. You leave maybe 2 lines, maybe, or 1, then you start the other. Neatness of the work is very important in K.C.S.E, because usually nowadays marking is very fast. because there is no time to mark. And I have emphasized that, do not change the question number. Do not change the question number. This is something I have said. I have said do not change the question number. If it is number 18, let it remain number 18. Number the questions as it is in the question paper. Then a point to note, choose questions wisely and carefully. Choose questions wisely and carefully. You must first read the question, then compare. I know there are questions of either 5 marks, and sometimes the part of 5 is usually very simple. This is 5, and you know you can score the 5. But B, you find this explain 5, explain 5 points, and then you know only 1 point. This means you can only score 7 marks. And another question, maybe number 19, A is 3, you do not know A, you can score 0. And B, maybe you know is 6 points, and maybe you know 5, or you know 4, which means 4 times 5 times 2 is 10. You should choose the questions carefully and wisely. Choose the questions wisely and carefully, being guided by the number of marks which are given. And as I have said, do not rush to answer the questions. Do not rush to answer the questions. Why? Because you have enough time to do your exam. There are students who will do the exam in 2 hours and they sleep for 30 minutes. This is not allowed in exams. And after all, you are doing exams so that you may score as many marks as possible. So start by what I have just said, maybe the first 15 minutes to read through the questions, followed by 2 hours of reading, of answering, followed by 15 minutes of revising what you have written. So do not rush to answer the questions. And as you answer the questions in the answer booklet, ensure that you are referring to the question paper. There is a student who reads question once and they start answering, and they do not refer to the question paper and to the question again. So as you write the answer, refer to the question paper, you write another one, refer to the question paper, you write a second one, continue referring to the question paper, to the question, so that you will not be irrelevant, so that you may be relevant. So do not rush to answer the questions. And again, I have emphasized this, and which I'm sure your teachers have done that. Write legibly. Try as much as possible to ensure that your work is legible and your work is, again, neat, so that it can be able to be read very fast. And again, I'm emphasizing on this, arrange your work, arrange your work properly. So you are supposed, as a student, you ensure that your work can be read, then make sure that your work is neat and arrange your work properly. And for as I said, something again we are supposed to note. Also, speed is also very important. And note that anything that is cancelled will not be marked. Anything that you cancel will not be marked. Even if you have cancelled it by mistake, it will not be marked. So be careful as you cancel the points that you think you do not want. And if you are to give 6, ensure they are 6. If you write 7, cancel one of them to ensure they are 6. Always make sure that you are not in a hurry to give the answer. Make sure you are referring to the question paper as you continue to answer, and make sure you are explaining your answer. But as I have emphasized, do not over explain. Again, I can remind you something I've noted. Maybe a question talking about this, I've talked about it, so that as we come maybe to question asking you about main, only one answer, you, so that you will not be penalized because of not following that. We have again noted that much of paper 2 work is mainly form 2 and form 4. So it is very important for you as a student to note much of form 2 work, much of paper 2 work is form 2 and form 4. Do not forget that. Do not forget that. So be careful, prepare well, read topics of form 1, read topics of form 2 concerning the paper 2. I already know that you know them, and you will score good marks out of that. You will score out of that. So I want to give other questions. As I have said, explain 5 reforms. Explain 5 reforms. Reforms introduced by the Germans. By the German administration. After March. Now, a student is very important to note that reforms are positive changes. So a reform is positive changes. Another question, it can be explain 6 positive impact of partition of Africa. This question was there in K.C.S.E, and there were students who, just because they have seen impact of partition of Africa. This is why I'm emphasizing positive are those which are good. So that is why I'm emphasizing you read the question, you read again, and as you continue to answer, you continue reading the question. Don't read part of the answer. A student who reads explain 6 impact of partition of Africa, they will end up writing both positive and negative, and for that which is negative, they will end up losing marks. They will end up losing marks. Maybe a student will be asked, maybe they will be asked, explain 5 reasons why Africans maybe in Tanganyika were defeated. This is maybe 1905, 1907. Then a student start the answer as British. Now we know these ones which were defeated were the Maji Maji, and the one who defeated them were Germans. I saw a student writing all the answers with the British. These are mistakes that I'm saying. British had, I saw a student writing this, British had superior weapons. You are going to lose all the marks. British had well-trained army, unlike Africans. British were well organized. They received reinforcement, and we are not talking about this. We are talking about Germans. So ensure as a candidate, you review your work so that careless mistakes like this you will not make. And when you write all the points, even if they are correct, British, 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 you are going to lose the 10 marks. And these are 10 marks which can change your, your grade of that subject by even 3 different points. So let us be careful on that. Let us be slow. Let us not rush in answering the questions so that we may not give what is not needed, so that we give what is needed and we avoid what is not needed as students. So it is important to note, as I said again, you must review your work before handing in your work. And this is usually the last 15 to 20 minutes. So spend your time well, prepare, read all the topics. Do not just revise without reading your notes. Combine the revision of the past papers together with your notes, which you are given by your teachers, which you are given. So consider all those areas I have given you. Consider all those specifics I have talked about, and I'm sure you will end up doing well. So arrange your work well. Ensure that your work is very neat. Ensure that you do not write on the margins. As I said, I've been saying about this margins. Avoid that. If it is number 18, write it there. You give the answers one after the other with the full stop. Then, if it is part B, you give the answers. You give the answers where it ends, full stop, you start another one. Where it ends, you put a full stop that way. If you are asked 6 points or maybe 5 points, you must explain 5. But remember, we have noted a question of describe may have many points and which you are supposed to write as many as possible. So I think I have said something, we have talked about something, and maybe I can maybe take a few questions so that I know maybe your area that you need something that you need me to clarify.
Okay, we are going to get questions from the schools. So I would like to request any school that has a question, you can have your question, you can have your hand up. Okay, we are going to start with Muvuti Boys High School. Kindly Muvuti Boys High School, unmute your microphone and ask your question. Muvuti Boys High School, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. Yes, Muvuti Boys. Muvuti boys, kindly go ahead and ask your question. Muvuti boys. Okay, we are going to move to another school. Let us have a question from Kwandanze. Kwandanze, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
You have said that we should not give our answers in point form. Which method can we use? Will we use paragraph or we just write our answers in continuous form? The second question is, do we have tied question in history? Thank you.
What? Excuse me? What are the second question?
Do we have tied questions in history?
Like what?
Tied questions.
Pardon?
Do we have tied questions in history?
Third question. Third question.
I'm asking, do we have tied questions in history?
What do you mean?
I'm saying,
Yes, I've
if the
gotten
first
you.
question,
Yes, the first one I got it. What are you talking about? Tight questions?
tied questions is about if the first question in section B is
Yeah.
talking about something about that question. In order to explain the third questions in Roman A above, to explain it in B.
Yeah.
Do you have something of sort?
I will answer you. So the method of giving answers, we, of course, you ensure that your answers are complete. They are in continuous prose. Of course, a point will be in a paragraph. Even if it is two sentences, let them be in a paragraph, such that the point can be clearly seen. And I'm encouraging you to space your point properly. What you are talking now for number 2, point form, ensure that the point follow one another. If maybe you are talking about economic activities, the first point you are to talk about hunting and gathering, let the second point come below that, the third point come below up to the last point. You will not be penalized, but do not write the first point maybe hunting economic activities, hunting and gathering, comma, trend, comma, another one. This may make your points not to be seen. Now, talking about the tight questions, these questions which are not so much that we find those questions which are tight. So you may find a question in section B, part A, and part B is independent from the other. Is independent from the other. So I think I've answered you.
Okay, let's have another question from ABC Iveti. Kindly, ABC Iveti, unmute your microphone and ask your question.
I'm Sharon from Iveti, and I have 2 questions.
Yes.
My first question is, if you're given a booklet and the question paper, are you allowed to paraphrase your question? And my second question is, if you are asked to describe, and earlier you told us that you can state and then you can state. Are you supposed to? Yeah. My question lies in, can you use an hyphen? Then you explain your statement.
No. You state the point. I start with that one for number 2. You start with the point. You can identify the point in one line, and below the line, now you give the explanation. Other than using hyphen, using dashes, which are not allowed. So you can identify the point in one line, and then below line, the following line, the consecutive line, then now you give the explanation. Paraphrasing, now You are not supposed to do that. But why should you? Should you paraphrase? Ensure that what you are giving is complete. You are given much space to write your answer, 16 pages, imagine, and you cannot even spend 10 of them. So write your answers fully up to the end and space them properly. Space them properly so that they can be easily be seen. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to have another question from Kidima ABC. Kindly, Kidima ABC, unmute your microphone and ask your question. Kidima ABC, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. Yes.
I'm Brian from Kidima and I have a question. If you get an open-ended question and if you get an open-ended question given six marks and you give 8 points and the first 2 are wrong and the others are correct, will you get the 6 marks?
No. Usually in each, the question to describe usually has more points. So if the first 2 are wrong, you will get the 4 which have remained, which are correct. So ensure that the first points, if you are to give more, ensure that they are correct. And again, even whether it is open-ended or closed-ended, after the required number, if it is 12 marks, then it means it is 6 points. But a question, if you are to talk about, for example, the social organization of the Mbunganda, you cannot be told to give 6 points, but you describe it up to the end. Maybe you don't know from where to where will the point be considered of two marks. So make sure the points that you are writing are correct. Start with the correct answers and ensure that you follow if they are 12 marks, which means there are 6 points, each is 2 marks. Remember, we have said in each section B, part B, and section C, part B, there is no question of 1 mark. For the last 3 years, I have seen that.
Okay. Let us have another question from Kasinga High School. Kindly, Kasinga, unmute your microphone and ask your question.
The question is about clarification. You have said when answering question, we are not supposed to use the dashes. What are we supposed to use?
If it is question number 18, you give the answer. The first line, the first answer. The second line, the second answer. The third line, the third answer. Don't use anything. Don't use anything. See, it is not a must you use and dash. Give the answer without using any of them.
Okay, let us have another question from Kasinga High School. Kindly, Kasinga, unmute your microphone and ask your question. Kasinga High School.
And what is the effect when one uses romance?
Romance. Of course, you will not be penalized because you have used Roman numbers, but it will tell us that this is not a serious student. And attitudes are formed from what you see, what you hear. Even you can hear about maybe this student is like this. So don't use them, but you will not be penalized for using them. But the moment we see that, we definitely know this is not a serious student. And from that perspective, having formed negative attitude, then you can be sure scoring may be a problem.
Okay, let us have another question from Chemoteke. Kindly Chemuteke and mute your microphone and ask your question.
Yeah, my question is, in questions about explain, you are
Explain. Yeah.
on questions on explaining, like question 18B, you're
18.
supposed the how and the why.
Yeah.
Then on that question you give the how and you explain on the how alone, and the why doesn't come out. Will you be given 2 marks or you lose all the marks? Thank you.
Explanation doesn't need to be too much. That is why I have said do not over-explain. Maybe it can be few lines to support your points. So please don't, not that you should not explain so much. Don't give us explain so much because each point is too much. And so give just a brief explanation.
Okay. Let us have another question from Kitanga Boys High School. Kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Yeah, my name is Joshua Mbunga from Kitanga Boys High School.
Yes.
I was asking if you can refer to the British or the French or the Germans as to the white people. And the other question was, if you have been given a question, for example, the main the advantages of air transport.
Yeah.
Can you say, is it applicable to use it is faster compared to water transport? Or you can just say it is faster?
Of course, you know air transport is the fastest. So you can say it is the fastest of all. And again, don't talk about white people, talk about the Europeans. The question asking you about maybe reasons why Africans were defeated, maybe by British, by the Germans, by the French. You can talk about the Europeans had superior weapons as compared to the Africans who had inferior weapons. So talk about the Europeans, white people. Now, we have not seen people who are white, although sometimes it might be used, but rarely. Talk about Europeans, and you will score the marks.
Okay, let us have another question from Kwandanze. Kindly, Kwandanze, you can unmute your microphone and ask your question.
My question is,
Yes?
what if you are asked?
Yeah.
My question is, if you are told to name the president of Kenya and you just know only one name, will you be given a mark?
One name. If it is one name, let it not be the baptism name. Let it be the name that they were given, not the English name. And you will score.
Okay, let us have another question from Muvuti Boys High School. Kindly, Muvuti Boys High School, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question? Muvuti Boys, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. Muvuti Boys, you can go ahead and ask your question. Muvuti Boys. Muvuti Boys. Okay, we are going to move to another school. Let us have a question from Chanda Secondary School. Kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. Kindly Chanda, reduce the voice of your.
My question is, umetuambia tuko na two types of questions, open question na closed questions. So, like, utupe question ya describe the political organization of the Buganda, alafu a student apeane like 6 or 12 points, of which ni 12 marks. And then umesema you only pick the 6 main points. So the student will be atakuwa awarded the 12 marks ama the 6 marks. That's my question.
A student gives 6 points. Excuse me. So a question like that, which is open-ended, I have said you, it has many answers. And a question especially to describe maybe social, political organization, you give as many points as possible. Who knows, maybe in the future or this year, NEC will change and maybe decide to award 1 mark for every point. So don't disadvantage yourself in exam. Remember, you want to score and do your best. So for that, give as many points as possible as you can remember. If they will be taken 6, you have an advantage because you will still score the top marks. But do not disadvantage yourself by writing maybe 6 points and you say they will be multiplied by 2. Maybe the system can change and maybe NEC decides because these are 14 points, we award each point 1. And so you will be in disadvantage if you gave 6, unlike a student who gave 12 points. So that is a point to note.
Okay, let us have another question from Mongala Secondary School. Kindly, Mongala Secondary School, unmute your microphone and ask your question. Mongala Secondary School, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Yes, I'm Dennis. I was asking that if you are told to give a difference between British policy and the French policy of assimilation, are you supposed to give the difference of British policy as in indirect or direct, or you give just commonly? Thank you.
You let the differences must come clearly. And so, you know, don't draw a table to say one side is British, another side is French, but use, just you can say the British used in indirect and indirect method, while the French used assimilation and association. So you must join them using while, don't draw a table. The tables will not be considered, maybe they will be considered in other subject. So be careful on a question like that. I know there was time it was asked, and there are students who drew a table and they lost the marks. They lost the marks.
Okay, let us have a question from Moa Girls High School. Kindly, Moa Girls High School, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question?
For example, when it is asked to the social organization of the man, can you place it in paragraph form on stage? The secondary, when it
Moa Girls, you can repeat your question.
Yes, for example, you said the social organization of the man, can you write in paragraph form or in question form? Then the other question is, when you told to say the function of council of elders, when you say they calculate the warriors and they also conduct the religious ceremony. Those are 2 points or different points.
I think your questions are not clear. So, your questions are not clear. I've not gotten you, please. you repeat the questions.
Okay.
Okay, I'm saying the first
Yes,
question
now
is,
I can get you now.
when you're being told to state the social organization of Somali,
Yes,
can you write in paragraph form or you just state? Then the other question is, wherever you're being told to state the function of council of elders,
yes.
first can you say they usually bless the warriors before going to war, and you write also they conduct religious ceremony. Those are 2 points or two different points or the same point.
Now, concerning the, like you have talked about the social organization, just the way you give the points in the lines that you are provided. After one point has ended, begin another sentence on a fresh line. Whether it will appear as point form or it will appear as paragraph, your points will be seen and marked. Do not just write as a composition, because it will never be taken for another subject, maybe like English. So please ensure that you arrange your work so that it is legible and it is easy to read, it is easy to see the points. Now, for the other question you are talking about, maybe the functions of the Council of Elders. You know, the Council of Elders had various many functions. If you say they solved disputes, still, it is not a matter that maybe you talk about the Somali Council of Elders solved disputes. When we are asking you about the Somali Council of Elders, we know what they did. We don't want you to repeat maybe the Somali Council of Elders solved disputes. But even if you repeat, there will be no problem. But for you to score as many marks as possible, ensure that each point is on a fresh line. Don't put 2 points on one line. Maybe if one sentence has ended, start the other one on another line, start the third one on another line, start on another one on the other line. Do not mix the points so that now you say now they are in paragraph. They may be difficult now to look for the points, and when we are looking, you may end up losing some marks. Please observe that.
Okay. We are going to get another question from Muvuti Girls High School. Kindly, Muvuti Girls High School, you can unmute your microphone and ask your question.
My name is Wamboi Gitau from Muvuti Girls,
Yes.
and I have a question. In section A, are you supposed to give short answers or are you supposed to explain?
Section A, there is no explanation you are giving. And section B part A and section C part A, you only give the answer. Part B of section B and part B of section C is where you explain. For example, if you are asked about maybe this person, maybe the immediate cause of the First World War, and you talk about assassination of Frank Ferdinand, you are not supposed to explain and continue telling us where he was assassinated, who was with him. That is not necessary. Just give the answer and maybe proceed to another question. So section A, no explanation. You are supposed to give the answer in the short form as it is asked.
Let us have another question from Upper Kitanga Secondary School. Upper Kitanga, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. Upper Kitanga, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
The first question is, let's say you have told to explain social organization of Uganda, and then you decided your answers. Have you penalized or second one is, if you transfer the question into into the answer sheet, are you also penalized?
You
The third
transfer
one,
pardon for the second.
so let's say you have transferred the question into the answer sheet. Are
Yes.
you
You will not,
penalized?
no, you will not be penalized. But nowadays, SNEC will give you a question paper which is tied with the answer sheet. So why would you write the answers maybe once again? I think it is not necessary. What is important is to be careful, and if you are answering number 18 or number 20, ensure that that is the number you are answering. And as I have insisted, do not change the numbering of the question from the question paper. If it is number 18, let it remain to be number 18. Don't change it. So there's no need of writing the questions, writing as many times. No. But if you write, you will not be penalized for that. Another question, yes, you have asked, you will rarely will you find a question of asking you, explain the social organization. In many cases, the question will tell you to describe. And when you are describing, you know there are many points that you can talk about. You know, like the Buganda, they had a centralized form of government. And whose their king was the title of their king known as the Kambaka. Now you are describing. So write as many points as possible. Points will be taken from your writing. And don't limit yourself. You say it is 12 marks, now 6 points. No, give as many points as possible.
Okay, let us have another question from Katelembu, Center of Excellence. Katelembu, Center of Excellence, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
It's Ian from Katelembu Center of Excellence. And
yes.
Kindly be more audible.
For instance, you have been told to state the effects of World War I. And then on your answer, you say death, put a comma or a full stop, and then explain your answer. You will be penalized for that.
Yes. Then you explain your answer. No, there will be no penalty, but in your answer, we must see that many people died during the war. That is now the point you are bringing out. Unaweza sema comma, then many people died during the First World War. You will still score 2 marks. But if you write the answer as death, destruction of property, and you leave it like that, you will not score anything.
The second question is on,
yes,
you have already finished your exam, and then you notice that you made a mistake.
Yes.
For instance, you answered number 1 incorrectly, and then you decide to cancel number 1 and write number 1 as the last question. Now, giving the correct answers.
At the back.
Will be marked or will be penalized for that?
It will not be penalized, but I have said let us be careful when we are answering, because the person who is marking section A, there may be another person who is marking section B and section C. And there are even times when a student pulls like 2 pages, skips them and goes and start on the 50th page. Please write in the pages in the order in which they appear. I know the questions will be in page 2, page 3, and sometimes page 4. Start from page 5 and giving your answers, page 6 towards page 10 in that order. When you skip some of the pages, it might be assumed you completed your work in page 5. Yet you skipped some pages to page 10, page 12. Then now maybe your work may not be seen. So it is good for students to organize themselves. It is good for students to organize their work. And I have said let the questions follow. But if you forget maybe for one question and you write it at the back and we see it, marks will be given. But let it be assured that number 1 was cancelled, so that if it appears in the last page, you score for that number. Thank you.
Okay. Let us have another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School. Kindly K.C.S.E Secondary School, unmute your microphone and ask your question.
Okay, my name is Caroline from K.C.S.E, and my question is,
you have said that you don't have to write outside the margin. So what about the question, like the number? Will you write inside the margin or outside the margin?
It can be inside the margin or outside, and there is no penalty for the number. So the way we write when we are having full scarves, the number can be outside the margin. Then there is no problem. But the answers, don't write them in the margin. There is no problem. Please note that.
Okay, we are going to have another question from Katoloni. Kindly, Katoloni Secondary School, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question?
Yeah, I'm Vobek from Katoloni.
Yes.
And I had a question.
Yes.
Let's say you are asked to, you have been given that question paper,
Yes.
and you have cross-checked the questions, and then you decide to start with question C.
Section B.
Section C.
Section C, yes.
Yeah, when I'll be answering, can I start with that section C, then follow up with section B, then section A? That is the first question. The second question is if I'm asked maybe the members of United Nations,
yeah,
and I'm not limited to the specific number that they want. They have just asked me list the members of the United Nations, and I'm not sure of my answer. Can I write as many as countries of Africa until the end? And the third question is, let's say I'm asked about the social organization of the Kikuyu. Should I answer it categorical, or I can just give the points that I remember? Thank you.
Now, for starting with section B or C, there's no problem. But if you start with section C, make sure you have done the 2 questions which are required from that section. Then you come to section B, you do the 3 questions which are required. Then you come to section A. Don't do 1 question in section C, you do another 2 in section B, you do another part in section A. You will confuse the examiner, you will also be confused. Again, if you are asked, for example, identify the members of UN Security Council, and you know they are 5, and you are given 3 marks. So now why are you going to write 5? Please be guided by the number of marks. Being guided by the number of marks. Concerning the social organization of the Angikuyu, if you know the name of their council of elders and you know the functions, now you are supposed to describe in details. If you leave the answers, you describe exactly what you know. And if you talk about the function of the council of elders, you will just earn 2 marks, even if you give 4 functions, because we want to see, do you know the functions of the council of elders? If you are talking about political organization, are you knowing that the head and decentralized form of government, the Angikuyu head and decentralized form of government, which was led by a council of elders? The Council of Elders had various functions like solving disputes. Even if you continue giving the functions, you will still score 2 marks in that. So do not measure in 1 point, and you know, even when you look at the books, they are detailed answers. So continue, give the answers as detailed. And I have said, don't give a wrong example. Don't say the name of the Council of Elders you give for the Council of Elders of the Ameru, because that will make you lose some marks. So thank you. I think I have answered that, being guided by the number of marks given. And even if you give 10 points and there are only 2 marks, you cannot score 10 marks when the maximum number of marks are 2. So please consider the guidance of the marks given per question.
Okay, there is a question from Chanda Secondary School, and they are asking, state regions that attempted to break away from Congo during 1960s Congo crisis.
So maybe for that one, I will not answer. I don't want to give you an answer I'm not sure about.
Okay, there is another question from Movuti Boys High School. They're asking, can we use the term whites instead of British or the Germans?
I've said you can use a common term like the Europeans and you will not be penalized. Europeans had superior weapons, unlike the Africans who had inferior weapons, and you will not be penalized. So it is important, I've said don't use the whites, just use the Europeans and you will score a mark because all of them were coming from Europe. All of them, all the Europeans, all those who colonized Africa, many of them were coming from Europe. So when you refer to the British as Europeans, Germans as Europeans, then there is no problem.
Okay, there is another question from Iluvia Secondary School. They're asking, how do you mark a process kind of a question?
A question like that which require a process, like maybe it can be the structure maybe of judiciary. If you ask a question like the structure of the judiciary in Kenya, there must be order. We know the highest is the Supreme Court. So if you write the High Court, then you come to Supreme, it has to start from the highest, the Supreme Court, you come to Court of Appeal, then you come to High Court. The answers must now follow one another in that process. Like maybe you can be asked a question on describe the British colonial administration, maybe in Kenya. They must come from the highest to the lowest, in that order. If you change the order, now you lose marks from where the order has been lost.
Okay, there is another question from Chanda Secondary School. They are asking, outline 6 developments on space exploration.
Now that question requires you to give the answers from where it started, where space exploration started. And we see even starting from the kite, continuing up to the time we have rockets to date. So it must be start from, I know there is the order in which they are given. So follow the same. Ensure you follow the same, starting from the first, followed up to the last one, which we have today as the rockets which are used.
Okay, there is another question from Machakos Academy Girls High School. They are asking, in section B, do you leave a space after every answer given?
I don't want you to leave a space after every answer, but if you write for a certain number, maybe number 18A, you are given the answers. If they are 3, you can leave a line, then answer number 18 in B. Then after you answer, you leave a line, you go to the other number. So don't leave, maybe the answers may not fit because the pages are about 16, but if you leave after answering maybe section maybe number 18A, you leave one line, then you answer number 18 in B, now then you come to number 18A, you leave a line. I think that can be better than leaving a space for every answer.
Okay, there is another question from Iluvia Secondary School, and they're asking, in a question like social organization of the Baganda, are you supposed to capture all the aspects?
You cannot capture all the aspects, but there are some that should be captured, like the family, like marriage, like we talk about like worship. We want to see worship. We want to see maybe division of labor. We want to see initiation. So you should capture the main areas. And all the same, you as students, we cannot write the same in exam, but we are going to see a family, we are going to see marriage, we are going to see how they worshipped God, and where did they worship God. And for many Africans, is the shrines. We want to see what kind of initiation did they practice, at what age, what happened after that initiation. You know, many African families were polygamous. You cannot capture all, but you should capture the main.
Okay. There is another question from Kwantanze High School, and they're asking, when answering a question, do you need to repeat the question once again or on the answer sheet?
If you repeat, there is no problem. If you don't, there is no problem. But ensure the number of the question you have not changed. I think I have talked about that. I have talked about that many times.
Okay, there is another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School, and they're asking, under which conditions will the president declare a state of emergency?
In case there is insecurity in the country, or maybe political instability. But it is important to refer from the textbook on the question, the topic of government. So it is important now to be referring from the textbook, please. Don't just revise past papers and you don't combine them with your notes which you are given, because some of these questions are just indirect from the book, and I know we have covered the syllabus up to the end and we are just revising.
There is another question from Machakos Baptist, and they're asking, the main reason of Devonshire white paper?
The main resort. So maybe you can refer from the book. Maybe I will not answer that because that is direct from the book. And I can go to another question.
Okay, there is another question from Katelembu Center of Excellence, and they're asking, what if you are asked to give the main advantage, but you have forgotten the main point according to the question? Then you give another point according to the question. Will you be penalized?
For that, there will be no mark. A main answer should be one. Is different from one. If you are asked one answer, give one advantage of this is different from the main. Whether it is the least advantage but it is an advantage you will score. But for the main, there must be that point which is main, and it is only one. So that is why I've said you give only one answer.
Okay, there is another question from Moore Farm Secondary School, and they're asking, what if you answer in continuous prose and the first two are wrong, then others are correct? What happens?
You will still lose 2 marks. You will not 2, but 4 if they are for section B. And do not make our work difficult when we are marking your exam. We want to see the answers very fast so that we can award you marks and go to another candidate. Because usually the work is very much, marking maybe 800,000 script, maybe in 10 days. We want to see these students who are writing properly, who can present their points in a best way. If you put points which are mixed in a paragraph, and some might be not seen because we are marking very fast and we want you to score as many marks as possible. So the best way, ensure that you give the answers in a manner that they can be seen. And your working is very neat.
Okay, there is another question from Chanda Secondary School, and they're asking, can we use a pencil in answering?
I have insisted you use black or blue. But even if you use a pencil, your work will still be marked. We usually even sometimes see students answering in red, and they don't lose marks because they have answered in red. But for them, we know this is a careless student, And remember your work, you want to impress the examiner. You see, this is a serious student. This is a student who was prepared. Don't use a pencil. Use black or blue pen, and which is writing properly. If it is not, please don't use a pencil or red or blue or white. There are students who use green pen. Use black or blue, and which is writing properly.
Okay, there is another question from Dominic Nisau. He's asking, can questions on current affairs be expected to be tested in the section A?
They can be tested, like there was a question asking about the first Black president in USA in number 17 of 2018. So current affair can be tested, but not many questions, maybe one.
Okay, there is another question from Chanda Secondary School, and they're asking, who was the first king of England?
I will not answer that. I've not seen any question asking about that, but I will not talk about that, please.
Okay, there is another question from Ngomeli Secondary School, and they're asking, when giving differences, are you allowed to use tables?
Please don't use a table. Use the word while, like the colonial system of administration, like the British and the French. We have said, you can say the British used indirect and indirect rule, while the French used assimilation and association. Don't use a table. Tables are not required in East. Don't use them.
Okay, there is another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School, and they're asking, state the function of the World Intellectual Property Organization.
That one I will also not answer.
There is another question from Miluvia Secondary School, and they're asking, in a process question, are you supposed to make the stages follow each other?
I have said if you are asked maybe the stages of development of animal before Homo sapien, any stage that is before then, you will score a mark. But if you can write them in order, then better. You will also score marks.
There is another question from Machakos Baptist, and they're asking, what if you write the no of the question? Okay, according to that question, let me just repeat it again. They are asking, what if you write the number of the question in the margin?
There is no problem, but don't give the answers on the margin. Because the margin, there is an examiner who marks giving rights on the margin, on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side. So your work is marked by many people. There are those who mark inside the margin. There are those who mark in the other side of the margin, because the margins are usually two. Please, numbering, there's no problem, but make sure you don't write answers to cross the margin. You don't be mean when answering questions. Space your work well. Ensure that the space you are given is enough. There's no need of writing the margin, please.
Okay, there is another question from Ilubia Secondary School, and they're asking, in case of a question that asks about structure, for instance, the French administration process in Senegal, are you supposed to explain or illustrate by use of arrows?
I have already said arrows are not needed in East, but just give your answers, and give, if it is a question of 12 marks, let your answers be detailed.
Okay, there is another question from Chambuko Secondary School, and they're asking, outline how Cold War was fought.
The Cold War, we know how it was fought. Like there was that question in K.C.S.E 2019 asking about the same. There is those methods which were used, like the propaganda, economic sanctions. Those are the points that are required for that.
Okay, they have a second question whereby they are asking, where were the free slaves settled in Tanzania?
There is that place in Tanzania which is known as Bagamoyo. I know that was a question in K.C.S.E 2019, so the answer was supposed to be in Bagamoyo.
Okay, there is another question from Katenembo Center of Excellence, and they're asking, if you are asked the names of people like presidents, are you allowed to use abbreviations? Will you be penalized for that?
If the name in the book has used abbreviations, you will be allowed to use. Like we know B.W. Du Bois. Now that one you will score B.W. Du Bois. So if the abbreviation is used, you can as well use it. But don't give all the names in B.W.D. That is, we don't know you are talking about what. But B.W. Du Bois, we understand what you are talking about.
Okay, there is another question from Kitulu Day and Boris Secondary School, and they're asking, when one is asked to describe the major developments in any country and he or she describes and does not give the exact date or year when the development happened, is he or she penalized?
If you are not sure of the years, don't give them. If you give wrong years, you will be penalized. You will automatically lose the marks. But if you are not sure of the years, don't give them. Give what is true, what is correct, so that you may not lose marks.
There is another question from Mungala Secondary School, and they're asking, you are told to explain problems in Tanzania since 1963. Do you give the political or economical problems or just general?
It is not easy to find such a question in the K.C.S.E. Many times when the question was asked, was asking about political challenges or economic challenges or social challenges, because the question now there is too general. But if it is general like that, you give some which are political, some which are economic, and some which are social, and you score.
Okay, there is another question from Katalembo Center of Excellence, and they're asking, if you are asked to explain the political development in Kenya that took place after 1964, should you state them in chronological order?
Now, if you know the years, like you know what happened in 1964, Kenya becoming a republic, and then there was the first constitutional amendment. Now, whereby the position of the president was introduced, changing now the position of the prime minister. You have to state the year and the development. If you talk about Party in 1991, you state the year and the development. So usually such questions, if you do not know the order in which they appear, you will lose the marks. You will lose the marks. If you give wrong years, then you lose the marks. But if you give in 1970, there was this. In 1965, there was this. And it is correct in 1965 that happened. Even if it is not in the order you have answered, you will still score marks. But if you give wrong years and the correct point, then you lose.
Okay, let us have the last two questions. The first one is going to be from Muvuti Girls High School. Kindly, Muvuti Girls, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question?
I was asking, is it a must for us to repeat the question on the answer sheets? Another question, while answering. Another question.
Yes.
While answering questions, is it a must to give an example? That is, when asking economic organization of Shona, they grew crops and then you give an example of that crop.
If you know the example, you can give. If you do not know the example, don't give, because you can give a wrong example and you lose the marks. And usually when you are asked about economic activities and you give about like hunting and gathering, you score the mark. Like you talk about like crop growing, you don't need even to go further and give the example. But if you know the example, you can give. But it is not necessary because it is a short and answer.
Okay, let us have the last question from Mua Girls High School. Kindly, Mua Girls High School, unmute your microphone and ask your question.
My question.
Yes.
My name is Nina. My question is, when you have been asked to state the factors that undermine national unity in Kenya, are you supposed to say racism, nepotism, tribalism as one point or what?
Now, each point is on its own. We know racism is a point on its own, but you have to explain what it means. When you are talking about tribalism, is a point on its own. You talk about nepotism is a point on its own. So each point is independent and you must give an explanation for that. But if you are taught in short form, list 5 factors that limit national unity in Kenya, and you say racism, you will score the point. You talk about tribalism, you will score the point. But if you are taught to explain 6 factors that limit national unity in Kenya, and you talk about racism, and you stop at that point, tribalism, and you don't explain, then you will lose all the marks. Remember, we have said there are only 2 marks given for each answer in section B, part B, and section C, part B. If you give an answer which is not explained, you lose all the marks. There's no aspect of 1 point. There's no aspect of 1 point.
Okay, there is a question from Kamudanga Secondary School, and they're asking, what is the name of the British missionary who was chosen to represent Africans in the LegCo?
Was known as Dr. Arthur, A-T-H-U-R. So for that question, the answer was, what is the name of the British missionary who was chosen to represent Africans in the LegCo? Dr. Arthur, D-R-A-T-H-U-R.
Okay, let us have another question from Chaani Secondary School. Kindly, Chaani, unmute your microphone and ask your question.
My name is Florence from Chani, and my question is, explain 5 reforms. My question is, explain reforms introduced by the Germans and administration after the Maji rebellion. Do we talk about the introduction of forced labor and taxation or what?
No, reforms I've said are the positive. Reforms I've said are the positive, the things which were done. We talk about corporal punishment was abolished. The removal of corporal punishment, and the forced cotton growing scheme was also abolished. Then Kiswahili was introduced as the main language of communication. When we talk about reforms, we are talking about things which are positive, not the things which are negative. So talking about corporal punishment being removed is positive. That is positive. Kiswahili being introduced as the language of communication, that is a reform. Africans being included in the administration, then that is a positive. So we talk about the positive responses.
Okay, let us have a question from Mumbuni Girls High School. Kindly, Mumbuni Girls High School, can you unmute your microphone and ask your question? Mumbuni Girls High School, unmute your microphone and ask your question. Mumbuni Girls High School, kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. Okay, we go back to Chaani. Chaani, your hand is still up. Kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question.
My name is Caro. My question is, when you are dealing about the question in the colonial land policy, is it a must that you write the year?
No, not necessary to write the year. But if you can remember them, write them. We want to see whether you know the policies which were introduced by the colonial government. But if you know the year, identify them. But if you do not know, don't give them. I've said don't give wrong years because you will lose marks for that. So be careful about the years. I have seen students saying when Kenya got independence in 1960, and yet they can write when Kenya got independence, and they write the point and they score. They lose 2 marks because of not being careful. So let us be careful when answering the exam, please, so that we score as many marks as possible.
Okay, we are going to get the very last question from Mua Girls High School. Kindly unmute your microphone and ask your question. More girls?
Yes.
I'm Malwa from Girls. I'm asking in that question of state factors that affect the national unity. When
Yes.
I've been told, when you said bribery, corruption, and greed, those are one point or different points.
We talk about corruption and bribery. So that those are different points, but there are those which like corruption and bribery. Bribery is a form of corruption. So when you talk about corruption, that is okay. You cannot talk about corruption. You talk about another one, bribery, because these are just the same points. It's just the one point. So I want to thank you for listening to me. I hope you have gotten something to help yourself. And as I conclude, please, I want you to emphasize more even on questions that you know, and try to discuss with your friends in group work and see, don't pass a question of east without answering it. Discuss it with your friend. Answer as many questions as possible, because questions are repeated in exam. We have seen for many years, questions are being repeated. And even start from the one you know. Try as many examples as possible. Work with your teachers, work as a group, make books your friends, and the current books. Don't read books which were used long before the new constitution, because some of answers may have varied, some of things may have changed. And please read more and more, so that when the exam comes, you can have something to give. And so that, and again, as I have emphasized, make sure you write your work is neat. Don't leave a point that you don't write, because after that history paper, you will not have other history paper in secondary school to do. But give as many answers as possible. Explain your answers. Do not limit yourself maybe to 2 when a question is open. Give the answers as many as they are, but do not make